Hello world. In today's tutorial, we're going to build a simple React component using Vite that allows users to search for places with a Mapbox API. We'll create a search box where users can enter their queries and get relevant location results. So let's get started. Let's open our Vite React project in VS Code. Next step is to create our searchbox.jsx file. This file will reside in the components folder and will contain all the code necessary for our search box functionality. Now that we have our searchbox.jsx file, let's add some basic code. We'll import React and create a functional component called searchbox. For now, just return a div with the text searchbox. We will work on this later. Next, let's run our project to see if everything is working correctly. First, we'll import our searchbox component into app.jsx. Now, let's check the browser. Great, everything is working. Before we dive into writing code, it's important to understand the Mapbox Search API. I'll start by opening the Mapbox Developer Playground. Here, we can explore the interface and learn how to use the API effectively. Open the Searchbox API Playground. This is the main interface where we can interact with the Search API. Here we have the API link that we'll use to send our requests. And here, we can see the responses from the API. Let's try some test queries to see how the API responds. As we can see, the results are displayed here, showing relevant locations and their details. On the right, we can see the response data from our test query. This section contains all the information we will receive when we make requests to the API. It includes details like location names, coordinates, and other relevant data. Understanding this structure is key to effectively using the API in our application. On the very left, we have options to tweak our API requests. Here, we can select the number of results. Here, we can select the proximity for our search. By setting a point on the map, the API will prioritize results that are closest to that location. This is a great feature for enhancing user experience, as it helps users find relevant locations nearby. Next, we have the country option. This feature allows us to restrict our search results to a specific country. By selecting a country, we can ensure that the results returned are relevant to that location, which is particularly useful for users looking for local information. We have even more options available, such as autocomplete, origin, and others. By selecting these options as needed, we can tweak our request URL to customize the API's behavior. This flexibility allows us to refine our search functionality and improve the overall user experience. Now that we've configured our options, our request URL is ready. Let's go ahead and copy this URL. We'll use it in our code to make requests to the Mapbox Search API. To use the API effectively, we need to install Axios. Axios is a promise-based HTTP client that will help us make requests to the Mapbox API easily. This will allow us to handle our API calls smoothly. To set up our API calls, we'll create a getplaces.js file in the API folder inside the SRC. This file will contain the logic for making requests to the Mapbox Search API using Axios. Now let's start coding. First, we'll import Axios at the top of our getplaces.js file. This will allow us to use Axios for our API requests. Next, we'll define our function to fetch places. We'll export it as an asynchronous function called getPlaces, which will take a query parameter. This allows us to wait for the API response without blocking the rest of our code. Now, let's implement the logic for our getPlaces function. We'll use a try block to attempt the API call. First, we'll retrieve our Mapbox access token from the environment variables, which we have stored earlier in .env.local file. Next, we'll make the GET request using Axios. We'll use the URL we copied earlier, ensuring it's wrapped in backticks, not single quotes. This allows us to embed the query and token dynamically. Make sure to place $query between Q equals and ampersand symbol in our URL, and $token at the end after access_token equals. Finally, we'll return response.data.features. This will give us the relevant search results from the API response. The .features is used because the data we receive in the response contains a variable called features. This variable holds all the necessary data in key value pairs, which we need for our search functionality. In the catch block, we'll handle any errors that occur during the API call. We'll log an error message to the console, indicating that there was an error fetching places. This will help us debug any issues that arise during the API request. Now, let's move over to our searchbox.jsx file to create the component. We'll start by import the necessary hooks in our getPlaces function. We're importing getPlaces from /API/getPlaces. This path indicates that the getPlaces.js file is located in the API folder, which is one level up from the current directory of our searchbox.jsx file. This allows us to access the function we created for fetching places from the Mapbox API. Let's start building our searchbox component. We'll create a div that contains an input element. This input will allow users to type in their search queries. We'll set its type to text, bind its value to query, and use onChange to call handle search change whenever the input changes. We'll also add a placeholder that says search for a place and set the width to 100% for a responsive design. Next, let's update our div to give it a specific style. Now, let's set up our state variables using the useState hook. We'll create a query state to hold the user's input, initialized to an empty string. Next, we'll create a places state to store the search results, starting as an empty array. Finally, we'll add a place visibility state to control the visibility of the search results dropdown, initialized to false. Let's define the handle search change function. This function will be called whenever the user types in the search box. The handle search change function is marked as async because it will contain an await statement. This allows us to pause the execution of the function until the getPlaces function resolves its promise. By using async, we can handle the API call in a clean and readable way, ensuring that we wait for the results before proceeding with the rest of the function. We'll get the input value from the event and update our query state. If the query is empty, we'll clear the places array and hide the results by setting place visibility to false. If there's a query, we'll try to fetch the places using the getPlaces function. If successful, we'll update the places state with the results and set place visibility to true to show the results. If there's an error, we'll log it to the console. Now, let's check the console to see if the data is being fetched properly. We've added a console.log result statement in our handle search change function, which will log the results from the API. This will help us verify that our search functionality is working as expected. Great, it's working. We can see the fetch data in the console, confirming that our search functionality is functioning correctly. Now that we're getting the results properly, we need to display them in a drop-down under the input box. To display the results, we'll use a conditional rendering approach. We'll check if place visibility is true and if there are any places in our places array. If both conditions are met, we'll render an unordered list. Inside this list, we'll map over the places array and create a list item for each place. We'll use place.id as the key for each list item and display the place name using place.properties.name. This will create a drop-down of search results under the eye. Let's check if it's working. And we are seeing the suggestions. The drop-down is displaying the search results as expected. Now, let's style the drop-down a bit. The unordered list is positioned absolutely below the input, stretching across its width. It has a border for visibility, and we've removed default list styles. Each list item has padding for spacing and a pointer cursor to indicate it's clickable. This makes the drop-down more user-friendly and visually appealing. Now, let's see the results. It's definitely better than before. However, we currently can't select the suggestions. We need to implement functionality that allows users to click on a suggestion to select it. Let's work on that next. To enable selection of a suggestion, we'll add an on-click event to each list item. When a user clicks on a suggestion, it will trigger the handle place click function, passing the selected place as an argument. This will allow us to handle the selection and update the input accordingly. Now, let's define the handle place click function. When a user clicks on a suggestion, this function will set the query state to the name of the selected place. It will also clear the places array and hide the dropdown by setting place visibility to false. This ensures that the input reflects the selected place and the dropdown is no longer visible. As we can see, it's working perfectly, allowing users to search for places and select suggestions from the dropdown. Now, at the end, I want to show you one more thing. In the Properties section of the result, we can see there are other data points related to the places. We can utilize this additional information to enhance our search box component, such as displaying more details about each place or using them in other parts of our application. Let's explore how we can incorporate this data. Here, we can see a data point named full_address, which provides the complete address of the place. To display the full address, we just need to update our list items. And now, the full address will be shown in the suggestions. Similarly, we can also display the coordinates of each place. Just update the variable to show the coordinates by checking their proper names from the fetched result. And that wraps up our tutorial. We've successfully built a functional search box component using the Mapbox API. Thanks for watching.